Hello and welcome to today's webinar about how the Social Housing Regulation Bill will shape the future of services offered by social landlords. Today's event, sponsored by SAP, will unpick one of the biggest challenges currently facing the sector and landlords. For starters, we know that the bill's stated intention is to drive behaviour change in the sector. So very, very much about changing the way that people work. And introducing the bill to Parliament last month. So what does this mean? The government stated explicitly that its purpose is to act as a major reset of power between tenants and landlords and to drive up standards in the social housing sector. Bigger social housing providers are told they face regular inspections. Tenants were told that they will be able to request information from their landlord, similar to the way that Freedom of Information Acts work for councils. The English regulator, obviously, much anticipated big change, now regulate consumer standards proactively. So at its most basic, the intention is to improve the safety and quality of homes and the way that tenants are treated. That's absolutely explicitly stated as the intention. Issues such as tenant engagement and complaint handling will shoot up in importance as a result. But if the way that landlords interact with their tenants will have to change, how could and should they set about doing this? What techniques and technologies will landlords be looking to use to understand their tenants' needs in order to improve their living conditions? In a world where complaints processes have too often been found to be failing, how can landlords deliver better customer support services? What technological approaches might improve their overview, enabling to solve issues more quickly? And crucially, in a month or a couple of months where we've seen two landlords hit by major cyber attacks, in a more responsive world, what are the data and privacy implications, and how should landlords protect against potential problems? So a few of the issues that we might well be talking about later. We'll also be asking how best to make interactions between tenants and landlords meaningful rather than transactional, I guess, and how best to track tenant satisfaction moving forwards. So there's a whole raft of big questions that are thrown up by these changes, and that's what everybody in the sector is currently wrestling with. So loads to get through today. To guide us through things, we've got a fantastic panel lined up for us. We'll be hearing from Emma Gilpin, National Consultancy Manager with TPAS, Jonathan Higgs, Chief Executive with Raven Housing Trust, John Hills, Global Vice President, Customer Experience, Sale and Service with SAP, and Sue Shirt, Executive Director Housing with Stonewater. So we'll be moving to the presentations very shortly, but welcome everybody who's tuned in today as well, and I think so many of you because it's such an immediate and pressing issue for the sector to get on top of. So for everybody who's actually tuned in, just a reminder that you've got a question and answer box, and this is absolutely your chance to hopefully get some answers to some of the practical questions that you're kind of currently wrestling with, and give you takeaways to inform your policy decisions back at the office. So please do make use of that Q&A box throughout the presentations, and I'll pick up on as many as possible when we get to the question and answer session that follows. So yeah, just a reminder there. And I should say, before we kick things off, let's just get a bit of a feel for where everybody is in the room today. So we've got a poll, which hopefully will be appearing before your eyes as we speak. And the question is, which of the following statements best describes where you are on your journey in preparation for the new tenant satisfaction measures? So we're well prepared and look forward to embracing them. We are aware of them and making initial preparations. We're aware of them but have not made any preparations to date. It's not currently on our radar or other. So a range of options there. Just give you a few moments to click on the appropriate one, and it just gives us a bit of a feel for where you are. And yeah, here we are. So we've got the answers, and interesting, we're at the initial preparation stage by the looks of it. So 60% of you in the room aware of them and making initial preparations, well prepared and embracing them. A significant proportion, but at that stage is kind of 15%. So there's clearly a lot of room for change, but that's about to imminently happen. So that's roughly where we are in the room today. So that's really useful to know moving forwards. Right, that is more than enough from me. Emma, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Martin. Really, really pleased to be here today. So I'll dive straight in. One of the things we've been doing, focusing on really over the last couple of years, is developing a methodology for a project we call re-engineering. And what we use a lot are a couple of key quotes, we think, from the regulator. And that theme, that really, really strong theme coming through about transparency and accountability. And of course, that's a real focus on customer communication. Because there's that need to demonstrate that all of your residents have the information they need as individuals to hold an organisation to account. So they need information about roles, responsibilities, standards to expect and performance in order to do that. And then, of course, the mechanism to hold organisations to account, which I think is a huge area of work. And also this real focus on governance. So that in order for organisations to be deemed to be well run and well governed, those systems need to be in place to really listen to customers, engage with customers and take action. And Kate Dodsworth actually did a keynote speech at our conference earlier this month, and she really, really talked a lot about culture. So tenants really being at the centre of an organisation, and that responsibility for boards and councillors in local authorities to be as focused on those day-to-day services, communication, customer satisfaction, as they are on compliance and building, and previously on things like finance and governance that were proactively regulated. And I thought she made a really interesting point. She talked about operational becoming strategic by virtue of reputational risk. So this idea that perhaps day-to-day services and transactions are operational, but actually they need to be thought about as strategic functions. And I think, the things that come out over and over again, I was doing a piece of work for an organisation and a customer said this: reply to people and fix people's homes. And I think it really comes down to that repairs service and communication as fundamentals for organisations to be able to demonstrate they're meeting these new regulations as they're developed. Obviously, the huge focus of our work is very much centred around residents holding organisations to account. And we utilise this particular quote from the white paper quite regularly on our projects and in our re-engineering, where we're working with organisations on their frameworks. It's clearly not enough to say you've got a formal panel or panels. It's very much about how do you think about all residents who are not proactively involved, because with the best will in the world, it will always be a minority of residents who come and take part in that proactive way. So we talk a lot about how do you hear that voice that might be silent at the moment. And we've also learned a lot in our transactions. We've done a lot of work with staff from across organisations and with residents who've never been proactively involved, working on language. So engaging very low level, very woolly, actually, for a lot of residents who've never been involved. And the regulators themselves have described that as being reporting a repair, as low level as just day-to-day transactions. We want to encourage residents to get involved where appropriate, but actually what we're moving much more to do is focusing on influence. So how can organisations ensure their frameworks demonstrate that residents are influencing strategies, policies, service design and delivery? And when we're talking about residents' influence, we are still talking about proactive involvement. Residents complete surveys, residents make complaints, residents may engage in a formal group and get involved in a formal activity, but actually it's beyond that now. What about influence that isn't conscious or proactive? What about organisations noticing the expectations, experiences and needs of residents without residents coming forward and explicitly telling them that? And I think it speaks really closely to what the Ombudsman's talking about, that requirement to be proactive, to go out, seek problems, seek and resolve issues without relying on tenants coming forwards and assuming that everything's okay if they haven't done so. So how do we do that? The regulator talks about assurance, not reassurance. So again, it's about that evidence, that demonstrating that there's that real understanding of what's going on. And that requires use of data and systems so that all of that information can be brought together, combined with insight and curiosity to actually really understand what residents are thinking, feeling, experiencing. And it's a different skill set and focus for a lot of us. Data analysis skills require data scientists are starting to be more and more prevalent. That insight and experience collection, utilising techniques like co-creation, journey mapping, but having the skills to interpret, to model systems and process, and to interpret those results to make improvements. And that demonstrating that you know and understand your tenants and use that information to provide the best service you can. I think just to sort of conclude really as I started off, it needs to be embedded across the whole organisation. So there's a huge internal communication piece there. We proactively work now with staff. We work across all different departments of organisations, staff who may say things like, oh, I don't deal with customers day to day. You know, it's really important that it's systematically embedded and led by boards and leadership in order to really drive that culture change, which sits really nicely for us because we actually have culture sitting at the centre of our tenant engagement standards, which is how we review organisations, assess organisations and deliver our accreditation. So really back to that core focus, good quality homes, good quality services, delivered through a focus on culture that's driven by leaders and developing systems that can really help to ensure that you're able to evidence that transparency and accountability. And that's it from me. Hopefully I've hit my time slot. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, thanks very much. A whole raft of issues to kind of pick up on, I think, and delve into in the Q&A there. Thanks very much, and kind of a lot of insight to kind of take away and think about what that means for you as an organisation. Thanks very much. And just a reminder, please do use that Q&A box, get your questions coming in so we can pick up on as many as possible following these presentations. So thank you very much, Emma. Jonathan, welcome, and it's over to you.
Great. Thanks very much, Martin, Emma. That's brilliant. So I was making loads of notes. Thanks. I'm going to give a few thoughts. No slides, just a few thoughts. Some strategic, some operational, or maybe now I should call them strategic as well. And if we get time, just a few thoughts on culture. A wide-angle lens first, just around strategic decisions. Most of us have already wrestled with rebalancing our allocation of scarce resources between the provision of additional affordable housing, investment in existing homes and investment in services. If we haven't already, I'm sure we'll be prioritising health and safety and that investment in existing homes, and perhaps net zero carbon over the provision of additional homes. And that's only going to become a more difficult decision as cost inflation bites for us and for our residents. So bottom line, in terms of services we're providing, we'll be providing fewer affordable homes. And I think that's significant to clock. Next, most of the sector stock is more like the Northern Line than the Elizabeth Line, and decisions about investment are just as likely to end in decommissioning and replacement as they are in improvement. So I think we're going to see more regeneration of our neighbourhoods, which gives huge opportunity for a really positive process about working with residents about what their neighbourhood looks and feels like. But of course, that takes a lot of time, an awful lot of time. So I think we'll see fewer affordable homes and more regeneration. And then we come on to really what we were talking about just now, about the need to understand, and firstly, to understand our homes. You're at a huge disadvantage making decision about the future of your homes if you don't understand how they perform and how that performance changes over time. And you want to know about performance not after the event, but before there's a problem. At Raven, we were really proud of some work we did around something we called a Healthy Homes Project, which started 18 months before the first ITV expose, when we went through all reports on complaints mentioning the words cold, damp and mould, and then targeted £2 million over 3 years to tackle those as a priority. But to be honest, that's a pretty antiquated approach in a world of sensor technology that can tell us about a problem before there is a problem. And that's the world that we need to be planning for, which is mentioned about the importance of data, and that's really central to how we understand how our homes perform, because that has a major impact on the experience that our residents have of living in those homes. And of course, we need to improve our understanding of our tenants too. and we'll all be doing this, I'm sure. Raven put together a range of customer segments about 18 months ago and have been using them, designing what we've called an onboarding process for new residents joining the organisation, designing our income collection process, and also looking at the delivery of digital inclusion work in support of our channel strategy about how our customers access our services in a way that is easiest for them. But it's pretty basic at the moment, and we're always looking to refine it. And there's some great stuff, if you haven't seen it, from Grand Union about how they look at segmenting their customers, which is really impressive and really helps shape how we deliver services. We're probably all looking at revamping our resident engagement. Most of us started it before together with tenants came along, but if we didn't, we certainly did it then. Raven, we've been doing that, looking at the different levels of engagement. We call it conscious, contribute, co-create and control, recognizing that different residents will want different things from that engagement experience. And we've already seen a step change in activity. We've recruited and trained 2 trainee resident board members. Our online surveys have increased in terms of response time exponentially. 800 residents feeding back on redrafting our pets policy, for example, which has been something of vital importance to them, and we've really benefited from that feedback. And we've got a new customer voice panel for that more kind of engaged group of residents. In support of this work, we've all got to invest in digital. And if you're doing it already, it's likely to accelerate. The sector's been really slow at adopting technology fit for the future, and many of us have got quite antiquated ICT systems and traditional operating models. At Raven, we spent £5 million and 3 years of a four-year transformation program to provide the kind of platform that will be required to deliver that transparency and the standards of service that the bill envisages. And just one small example, for a resident can now make a complaint via the customer portal and track the progress of that complaint, exactly who's dealing with it and where it is in the process. So that kind of transparency, it's a really simple little thing, but it's really important to give people that clear picture about where their issue has got to within the organisation. Communication, as we said earlier, absolutely key. And the bedrock of this operating model that will be data. At the centre of our thinking, we've got 2 words, actually. We've got culture and we've got data. Both things lead back to that, or lead back to those 2 items. I think we'll also have to consider our ways of working. Better systems, better data should make us stand back and challenge whether a specialist or generic models are right for service delivery, and the impact these might have on levels of trust amongst our residents. So I think it's probably something that, again, the recent Peabody experience will also impact and make us stand back and think about whether we've got that balance right. At Raven, we switched to specialist schemes about 8 years ago, but the world's changed a lot since then. And for our residents, a lot of them don't actually want very much from us, just a 100% reliable service that's easy to access. Whereas for others, of course, and that's an increasing percentage, greater support is required and trust is much harder to win and retain. Finally, a few random thoughts. We should brace ourselves for continued growth in complaints. If Housemarket are believed, your typical 10,000 home housing association will need just short of another 3 people to operate their complaints process. We should get ready for freedom of information style inquiries. We have no idea quite what that's going to look like yet. But again, that's going to demand better systems and better data management. We should hang on to our health and safety teams because everyone else is going to want them. A concern that I have around the cranking up of regulation, not just from the regulator of social housing, but also from HSE and obviously input from the Ombudsman, is in the sector's past experience of regulation is it's tended to drive caution and risk aversion and potentially unnecessary bureaucracy and cost. So the challenge for us and for our regulators is to try and avoid the worst qualities of regulation and kind of support what is required of a modern organisation, which is to be agile and adaptable and capable of accommodating change at an ever-increasing pace. none of this will matter diddly squat if we don't have the right customer-centric culture. And I think hopefully we can talk about that in Q&A rather than talk about it now. But it is absolutely central what we do to build that culture in our organisations, because no system, no process is ever going to do it on its own. And rather a depressing reflection to end on, will the sheer challenge of these investments drive further consolidation in the sector? And will that make delivery of the bill's expectations easier or harder? Maybe we'll chat about that in the Q&A. But that's it from me, Martin. Thanks very much.
Thank you, and that was me frantically scribbling notes as we go as well. So yeah, thanks. Really interesting series of reflections there, and yeah, a lot to pick up on in the Q&A that follows. We've got plenty of questions coming in, so just again a reminder that this is your opportunity to ask questions that are going to be of practical use to you, or provoke thinking within your own organisation. So do get those questions coming in. We've got a nice audience as well. So Emma, there was somebody who wrote in just saying it was a great, clear presentation. So just some instant feedback as well. So thanks very much for writing in with that. Jonathan, thank you. John, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we've had some really interesting chats as we've gone through over the last 20 minutes or so. So why am I here? Yeah, so I work for SAP, and as I look through the list here, I see a number of you are already customer of ours, and I'm thinking, why is John Heald and SAP presenting here? They're our finance system. And really what I want to go through here is what we do to help organisations, including some housing authorities, in helping them get a better understanding of how they can help their residents, how they can provide the level of information, and as everybody's said up to now, how can we utilise data in order to deliver a better service to our customers, but also how can we use this as a way to learn more about them and help and support them. And as we talked about data being the centre point of everything that we need to do, is making sure that all the people that need that information have that information at their fingertips. Is one of your residents vulnerable? We need to make sure that everybody's aware of it. Is one of your residents hard of hearing? Therefore, what do we need to do to make sure that when the guy goes around to fix the broken door, he's aware of how to communicate? So it's really about how do we support organisations with bringing this information together in order to make it easier for you to support providing this data as they request it from that perspective, in order to keep aligned with what the bill's about. So if I just talk about what we do from a service perspective and how we can help provide that level of understanding, information and granularity of resolution, but also bringing the feedback into this scenario as well to make sure that we're delivering the service that the residents are expecting from that setting, but also giving us recordability of what we've done. So as these regulations start getting tighter and harder and demanding and information coming out of this, how can we make sure that you have got the data that you need in order to spend 20 minutes producing the report that you need to publish rather than 20 days? We all know the pains of having to go through 74 different Excel spreadsheets, a few of the old visual screens that you've got, talking to your third-party providers 47 times to get the data that you need. How do we make and deliver that in a simple possible fashion? This is one of the diagrams that one of my marketing team came up with, and I really like how this tells the story of what service is all about and how we can hold this information and how we can help provide a level of response to our customers, to our residents, to our citizens that we need to do. And if I just break this down, and we first think about the outside curve of this. So we need to make sure that we're able to receive the requests from our residents in whatever format they need to do. So maybe we're getting requests coming through. Maybe people are phoning us. You never know. Maybe people are asking us for specific information by using basic text or chatting with what we have on our website. As we've seen more and more, and I guess most of the people on this call will be suffering this pain as well as I do, Teams. People are using Teams, MS Teams, as a way to communicate information backwards and forwards. So how do we take these requests through which channel people wish to engage with us and provide the level of information response, but also analytical capability across these areas that we need to do? So making sure we can deliver what our residents are asking for, however they decide to ask for it from that perspective. And then if we move to the inner curve, this is about how you move through the progress cycle of solving customers' problems. So maybe you want to give them self-service. So if they want to request the freedom of information data, maybe we'll give them a portal to access this information. Maybe they can just go and download all the data themselves. And from a self-service perspective, sometimes we need agents involved. So maybe there's some specific information that we need to have. Maybe it's we need to register that something is broken. Maybe we need to register some of the information about how I need to get the data, not for me, but for somebody that I've got the power of attorney over. So how do I start bringing that sort of level of data? Stuff that you might not want to do through a self-service, but then also how do we make sure that we're delivering against the expectations? So the van rolling capability, or field service as we call it, how do we make sure that we've got clear communication through all of these cycles into resolving the customer's problem and providing analytical information and making sure that we're delivering this within the bounds of what's agreed within our terms and conditions, but also the expectations that this bill is giving us. And as the people have talked about before, it's making sure we're there to listen. So bringing the feedback of information back into the process to improve both the service delivery, provide guidance for our employees on how they can get better as well, but also listen to the pulse of what's going on. We may be hitting the SLAs that we're agreeing to, but is this actually what the expectation of our customers and our residents are? So making sure we're considering this loop in how we bring this information together and making sure that what we're doing is improving this all the time. The reason I love this diagram is the phraseology that my marketing team use is we move from no touch in self-service. So how do I support my customer without ever touching them, for want of a better phrase, through the agent from a low touch. So how can I scale this up and provide some one-to-one interaction with a real live person, but supporting what the customer needs, into the high touch of field service when I need to have the cost basis of doing something complex. But making sure underpinning all of this, we have all the relevant information that we need to have about how we resolve and how we solve the problem. So when they ask for the data, we can easily publish and give them access to the information they're entitled to, that they need, in a timely fashion from that perspective, and continue bringing this information through into how we improve all those areas. So really thinking about how we can solve the problems of our residents, but also how we can have the information that they need to have in order to be able to produce this and share it with them in the most efficient fashion that we can. So here's how we help housing associations. And I just want to talk about one. So the city of Vienna, which was actually voted the highest quality of living city in the world for 4 years on the trot. And again, there's a link in the chat here to the report there. An SAP, my solution, supports all of their public housing needs from this area. And I'd like to think that's one of the reasons why it's voted the best city. Probably not, but it helps my ego from that perspective. And they're using this to support over 500,000 people in providing the service that they need to have across both the self-service, the customer service, the call center, but also the citizen feedback to bring that information through to make sure they're continuing to help resolve and solve the feedback and the issues that their people are feeling, but also allowing them to have a way to get this information back in and produce the reports that the EU need and also the local government needs to provide this information at their fingertips to deliver the service that they're actually committed to delivering from that perspective. So again, we have a great portfolio of capability to help. We've got a number of customers in this sector in the UK utilize the solution. And again, the city of Vienna, who's a reference customer of ours, has really declared this and presented on stage several times with me, talking about some of the great values that they've had. So the idea of me being here is to support with what we're trying to do here, but also let you know that when you're looking at how you're trying to help provide and support this regulatory bill, we've actually got some great capability that's all citizen engagement orientated to make sure we're there to help support the residents, but also provide you with the information at your fingertips to help provide the data that you need to make you better as well. So again, I know that's been a quick whistle-stop tour, and I can see Martin looking at me that he wants me to shut up because I've exceeded my time. But again, really happy to get involved and support with any of the questions that you've got, but any ideas that you face or any challenges that you've got, and how we can help with some of the data information that we've got, but also how we can help you support the new bill in providing that level of quality of data back out, but also the ability to provide the analytical stuff that's going to be needed to be fed back. Whatever is required today, we all know how these bills go. The demands and the requirements of analytics will only improve as we move forward. But just let you know, we have a platform here that can really help you take that forward. And Martin, I'll now shut up and I'll now hand back to you. And I'll stick around for the Q&A later. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, John. And yeah, a lot to pick up on there. We've got loads of questions coming in, and everybody is sticking to time, so you've got a happy chair as well. So thank you very much. And yeah, I just before we move to our final presentation, like I say, we've got a lot of questions coming in, but this is your chance to ask the questions that are going to be useful to you, and to put it to the panel. So please do get those questions coming in, and I will get through as many as possible following our last presentation. So yeah, thank you all, and thanks, John. Sue, welcome, and I will now hand over to you. So over to you, Sue.
Thank you, Martin. Well, first of all, just to stress that whatever we do in relation to responding to a change in regulation has to be down to what is necessary and appropriate for the organisation in question. I think what's really important is that we're driven by the intention behind the regulation as opposed to being driven by the regulation itself. So what does that actually mean? Well, across our organisations, and we do need to look inside our own house first, we need to understand that our customers don't deserve a lesser service by the nature of the tenure that they live in. And if we concentrate on that, then actually all of the watchwords that we've heard so many times in the presentations to date will actually help us to move that whole stigma, or getting rid of that stigma, forward. There is no one solution. We've talked about listening and learning, understanding the wider voice of our customers. We've talked about system design and not just IT, but we have talked about the use of tech. We've talked about the use of insights and customer segmentation and data and understanding our customers, the needs of our customers in our communities, and how we design our services to make sure that that very start of this conversation, how we make sure that our customers get the very best of services, regardless of the tenure that they live in, and therefore gain that, developing a positive narrative across our wider sector and into our communities as well. So there's no one particular piece of a jigsaw that we need to implement in order to make this a successful transition service for our customers. Now, we know that our customer services across different sectors have actually changed significantly between 1990 and 2019. Expectations of customers have changed. Our expectations in the way that we interact with other organisations has very much changed. And yet in the housing sector, actually, we changed very little. But yet then COVID came along, and whilst I don't want to reflect on the pandemic, we do get the fact that actually it demonstrated that in the face of adversity, there was a need to redesign our services and to innovate in order to survive. It gave us a license to redesign. It gave us the ability to test with permission. It gave us the ability to get things wrong and yet be forgiven for them. So it demonstrated that we could reinvent ourselves as a sector. And if we can reinvent ourselves when we're faced by something like a global pandemic, then we can reinvent ourselves to address the issues of stigma and to address the issues that the regulatory standards are aiming to achieve within our wider sector. So it demonstrated that we can deliver by digital, because ultimately we wouldn't have been able to serve our customers over the time when we weren't able to go into people's homes. We can even do that when it comes to well-being. It demonstrated that our colleagues could work from home. They could work differently. They could work in a hybrid way. They could work from other places in terms of in cafes, etc., that actually they could work in different ways that would still allow us to deliver services to our customers. It demonstrated that we needed to work in partnership with our communities and those organisations that exist in communities in order to be able to serve. It demonstrated that we could prioritise and deliver a different service to our vulnerable customers rather than delivering the same service to everyone. We could personalise that service. And it demonstrated that personalisation could be delivered through digital methods. Now, why do I reflect on that? Because it's a time that has passed, and yet we're seeing people referring back to the way that they worked before, rather than seeing this as a catalyst to actually drive our service improvements and our innovations going forwards. That actually, to meet the requirements of the regulation, and if we're going to look at that whole jigsaw of changes that needs to happen in order to be able to deliver against the regulatory expectations, that actually that momentum, that bravery, that willingness to deconstruct our services and then reconstruct them is where we should focus. And actually that's the risk that regulation brings. The risk that regulation brings is that actually it requires inspection on the ground. And we could be pulled backwards so that we become safer, less willing to test out new ways of working, because actually we're scared of getting it wrong. We're scared of being judged in a public environment. And yet the expectations of our customers are changing, and without changing ourselves, we will never be able to keep up with that. So let's look at some of the positives. Well, first of all, let's see the positives in active regulation. This could put customer service, customer experience right at the top of the agenda, on that top table. The ability for boards and executives to be really focusing on what customers are saying to us. And when I talk about what customers are saying to us, it's not just about engagement. It's not just about scrutiny. It's not just about formal groups. It's that wider voice of the customer. So we've talked about understanding from the data that we have. So talked about how we look at when customers are asking things of us. How are they asking? When are they asking? How do we better serve our customers to be able to meet that need? But what about wider data that exists in our society about our customers that will allow us not only to look at expectations now, but to predict forward how they might change going forward? So around where they are in their lives, employability, connectivity, the design of homes and how it facilitates people to thrive in their homes. How do we take some of the lessons we've already got from managing income to actually predicting where our customers need us to help them, to serve them, in areas like antisocial behaviour, or in areas where we've got tenancy change or overcrowding that could well be resulting in people suffering from things like damp and mould. These are all important things that we've got to concentrate on. But right at the beginning, we talked about a whole jigsaw, and certainly the culture of your organisation is vital here. So we created a customer strategy based on the items that you've got listed there on the presentation. But the customer strategy was the foundation for our strategic plan. And our strategic plan has nowhere to hide in terms of focusing on the customer. It's got 3 objectives: customer-centred services, quality homes and neighbourhoods, and maximising value for customers. There is no part of that that allows corporate services not to see their role, to understand our customers now, and how we use the power of organisations to be able to make a difference in their lives. There's no place to hide. And that focuses then on the delivery of our customer promise, which is we're proud to make things personal. If it matters to a customer, it matters to us. So just moving on to my last slide. We talk about stigma. We talk about the criticisms that we've seen across the media in terms of where we've got things wrong. But we've got to create a positive narrative about a sector that we absolutely love. Because if we don't create a positive narrative, we won't attract the best talent of people to come and work in our sector that will allow us to go back to that, seeing this whole jigsaw of changes that need to happen within our organisations in order to change the perception of wider society about the services that we offer and the customers that we serve. We need to make sure that actually people see us as being innovative, able to test out new approaches, willing to deconstruct our service offer and then redesign it based on meeting the needs of our customers. It's how we ensure that the intention behind the regulation becomes in our blood. And therefore, we've got a legacy that we can be proud of. Because the one thing we know is that we not only need to focus on redesigning our services, the way we use data, the way we work as organisations in order to keep up with customer expectations. We have to do exactly the same thing for our colleagues as well, because otherwise we'll continue to see the great resignation and people leaving, and we will never match the money that people can get in other sectors. So I'll leave it there. I hope that's given you a picture of the fact that there is no one golden solution to ensuring that we address that fundamental challenge of how we ensure we modernise our services to deal with that whole piece around customers, because of their tenure, might receive a worse service. We've got to concentrate on how we make sure that we are at the vanguard of changing that, making that a different place for people to work in. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And a huge amount of a huge number of issues to kind of try and unpick there, and a huge amount of thought that I think people can take away. Just seeing a few more questions. There you go. It's still a friendly audience. Veronica says, "Great presentation, Sue. Thank you very much." So just again a bit of instant feedback there. So I will now start to pick up on some of the questions that have been coming through. Like I say, we've had a significant number coming through, picking up on some key themes. And Emma, I might bring you in to start off with, really to pick up on, I guess, a theme that ran through a number of presentations, but particularly you highlighted in yours. And this was this I guess, need to demonstrate that residents have influence. So it's I guess not enough to say you've done a consultation, you've gone out, but yeah, I mean, I think you're talking about demonstrating that residents have an influence. So I mean, I guess the question for me was perhaps let's unpick a little bit more about how you demonstrate that, how you show that moving forwards. And the question from Emma, from the audience. And this seems to be common to, I think, a number of conversations I've had over the weeks and months. We do get so much insight every day from customers, and I agree there is a fine art in terms of translating insight into actions. It's something we struggle with, and I'm sure others do, looking at how we can bring it all together, make sense of it, and then push it into actions that have impact. So, I mean, I think, we hear quite a lot that the sector struggles because of the quality of its data, but actually just the quantity of data as well. So how do you make sure that's translating into kind of the right actions and the most important actions? So Emma, I'll bring you in first on that, and then I'll move to others on the panel.
Yeah, thanks. And it's a real challenge, isn't it? Because I think, we've used to having some formal panels sort of sitting over here, day-to-day transactional things sitting over here, and bringing all of that together is a real challenge. And that's why we do a lot of work with organisations to try and think through, and requires that embedding across the organisation as well, because it needs a corporate approach to it. I think my reflections were, you need a system that's working to collate that, where everything can actually be brought into one place. Then you obviously need to make sure you've got the skills to be able to actually use that data and interpret that data and information, the culture to act on it. So the people who are collating and sharing that insight are not likely to be the people who can actually make the change. So there needs to be that culture of then that being able to be shared with the appropriate team, the appropriate manager, and they have the facility, the passion, the ability to act on that information. And then I think, we talk all the time about closing the loop, and it's about that communication, isn't it? Everything comes down to with the resources there to actually be able to track that action happening and be able to communicate that that's happened. And we hear that all the time from residents. I gave a view, nothing happened, I'm not going to bother anymore. And something may well have happened, they just don't know about it because it's that focus on really clearly articulating this is actually what we've done, and measuring and reporting on the success of that action as well, to make sure that that outcome is achieved and shared.
And when that's going wrong, so nobody's setting out perhaps to not communicate properly in terms of what actions have been taken, how that insight and involvement has fed into change. When that's going wrong, why is it? And how do you spot, I guess, that it's going wrong? I mean, without perhaps waiting for the regulator to step in at some point in the future, or the ombudsman or whoever, how do you kind of spot that early doors?
Yeah, I think probably we tried to do too much, actually. So when we go into organisations and talk to organisations, we ask them about impact and outcomes. Quite often it's difficult to point to, and I think it's because there's so much activity. So what we do a lot of work now with organisations is to try and rein the activity in and make it much more focused and purposeful. So almost thinking about everything in a project approach. So setting out with an outcome, you've identified a problem or an issue or an area for improvement, you're doing a piece of work to identify and to implement some change, and then to be able to actually measure that it's made a difference. And I think by pulling that in to really focus, and the other thing as well is when you're doing targeted activities, you can be much more targeted with the customers and the residents you need to engage with on that. So, you know, it's about customers who've got that specific lived experience and getting an understanding of them and getting their views on what could be done differently. I think by reining that in and focusing in a much more targeted, project-based activity, you have a much better chance of demonstrating success and that you've made a difference. And certainly the regulator is very, very keen on that target and focus. So who don't we hear from? Where might we have an issue that we don't know about? Well, let's go and do a piece of work on that, and let's go out and target those residents, those customers specifically, to work on that as an issue, rather than spreading ourselves too thin and just feeding an awful lot of activity that perhaps it's difficult to demonstrate the impact of.
Thanks very much, and I will. I think those are really important points, and which we'll kind of reflect and enlarge on as we move forwards. I think let's move to John next on that. That's kind of similar question, I guess. That there's so much insight every day from customers, that kind of struggling with I guess the quantity and how you kind of pull that together into one coherent piece or something that's coherent. So John, let's get your opinions on that, if that's okay, and then I'm going to move into the questions of skills and resources, which I think Emma touched on there, and that a number of our audience have asked questions along those lines. So John, over to you.
Yeah, no, Mike, and that's essential to provide that single view of the citizen sort of, and that's why from what we do, the citizen is the centre point of our contact. So everything we do is related into the engagement that we've had around that. So whether this is a request for information, whether there's a repair, whether this is a complaint, whether this is feedback, whatever it is we're doing, we're feeding that and seeing that from the citizen. So whenever we want to see the data, we can effectively use the citizen as a central point of contact and go and say, right, here is all the things that have happened to them, and also do some of the journeying side of it as well. So is there a cause and effect? So have they asked for the information because of something that's happened previously? So we can see that we all know the loop isn't always as clean as we want it to be. People never start off on the journey where we think they should do, but it's how can we view the point of where the citizen has been engaged, where the resident has started the engagement and interaction with us, and how that's impacted the other things, and looking at things to see if there's any trends. So is there trends of specific issues with blocked drains in a certain geography? So maybe there's a bigger problem, and again, because we work with most of the utility providers as well, we can then bring that information directly to them to go and say, I think there's a problem in Brixton with water quality issues because of the impacts we've got. So making sure we're able to see things from the citizen's viewpoint and see it from their perspective, but also being able to tangentially move this to the property as well. So as we know, residents move in and out of properties, so maybe there's a specific thing that this property has. So giving us the viewpoint to see it from the citizen's viewpoint, And when sharing information for this regulatory bill, it's about the citizen, but also allowing us to flip that on its head to go and see, is there property effects from this purpose? Well, so maybe we look at this as a property journey, because there could have been specific things. So maybe some repairs that have been done by a third-party provider, maybe there's a trend against them of this provider not providing the quality of service that we expect, and there's long-term effects of doing that. So it's really about looking at the citizen and looking at the resident of how they've taken their journey, but also allowing them to spin that on their head to look at the property, but also extrapolate that out to also look at the repair as well, to see how all these things view, depending upon what is it you're trying to get to the answer to, as long as I've seen some of the comments in the Q&A as well, seeing how we're doing this from a cost perspective as well. Because we all know budgets are not going to get bigger, but demands are going to get higher. So how can we always make sure that we're viewing this from a delivery of a service in a cost-effective fashion alongside the delivery of the service as required by the government rules that we have? So it's really allowing us to view the data from whatever way we need to make sure that we've got a good viewpoint to provide impact and decision-making based upon the limits and the constraints that organisations have.
Thanks, Ro. And that resource question, you're absolutely right, has come up a number of times in questions. So I'm going to move on to skills and resources now. Thank you very much, John. I might bring you in quickly on that skills point. But Jonathan certainly was talking about, I guess if we're going to see complaints going up, that's something we should be anticipating. Staffing levels should be increasing there. I think a number of the issues in terms of pace of progress, Sue's point about being scared of getting it wrong, kind of point towards questions about the skills gap and I guess to what extent does the bill point to a new skill set that's needed for social landlords, and what would that mean in terms of structures and who should be hired? So is there a kind of skills problem just in terms of that kind of pace and people being comfortable with change? Jonathan, I might bring you in on that first, and then Sue, I'll move to you to get your opinions. Interested in that, and a number of questions about resources, which I'll kind of follow up with. But let's just briefly talk about skills. So, Jonathan, over to you.
Right, thanks, Martin. A couple of points on this. We've talked a lot about digital and data, so I'll talk about the skills in that area, but also more broadly, and touching on culture skills. Good customer experience and customer service skills are absolutely key. So first on digital, that's a real catch-all, and data. All of us will be seeing different job roles in our organisations that go back just 5 years ago. I had no idea what these people did, and we were recruiting systems architects and data analysts that had never existed in a housing association before, and now we've got quite a lot of them. Business analysts that help us map our processes from start to finish, and then data analysts that and there is no shortcut to data, by the way. There's quite a few questions about data. There is no shortcut. There's a lot under the water, under the surface of data, where you have to build that data lake and your data warehouse that allows you to then join the data up and start using it in a meaningful way. And the skills around that, kind of designing that architecture, building that system, are hard to get, and they are expensive. And that's the point that I made earlier about competing resources around what you invest in. You can't spend the same pound twice. Spending it on building your digital infrastructure, it means you can't spend it on improving your properties or building new homes. So you make some tough decisions. We'll need data skills. We'll need very different skills in terms of how we develop our systems. A lot of the systems we're investing in now, certainly at Raven, are ones we more or less own, we license, but we can develop them ourselves to suit the challenges that our residents face and how we want to work. So you need people that are capable of systems development, and they are not likely to sit in the old IT department. They're likely to sit within the business units and work alongside the business units, developing the design of the service and the design and functionality of the system. So that is already looking and feeling very different and has got a long way to travel. The second point is just around customer experience and that kind of customer culture that we've been talking about. And it links to a question in the chat about, how do you engage with people that do not use systems, are not digitally savvy, and there are still in our homes an awful lot of those residents, very vulnerable, and for whom the only way to deliver a service is to sit in their front room for an hour and a half and talk with them and win their trust and work hard at understanding their circumstances, and then feed that back into the system in a way that will help you better manage and deliver services to them. So the quality housing professional sitting in someone's front room is an integral part of housing associations in the future. No amount of IT systems is going to substitute for that. And those people have got to be trained, and they've got to be really digitally savvy as well. A carpenter, a plumber will need to be digitally savvy to do their job. It's no longer good enough just to be a carpenter and a plumber.
Thanks very much. And I think hopefully that also answers David, who's just come in with a question about, is recruiting all these data people not overcomplicating things? Don't you need staff who visit and speak to customers as well? So, yeah, I think we kind of touched on that, as well as a question from Clive about how housing organisations are expected to manage realistically with such increased costs, with things like, well, certainly I think rent levels are not likely to be set at the maximum next year. So, yeah, I'm going to move on now to a number of questions about customers who aren't engaged. But actually, John, just very quickly, I'm going to bring you back in, just on that question of skills. A brief answer, if that's okay, because we're running out of time. But is that a problem you've encountered with the sector? So when you're talking about people embracing change, looking at new ways of doing things, is there a skills problem there, and just in terms of people being comfortable with doing that? So just a brief answer from you on that, if that's okay. So John,
yes, there is, yes, it is. Brief answer, but also it's about understanding the changing demographics of the residents that we have using the social housing and their expectations as well. So it's managing not the demands of what the skills are needed as of yesterday, it's managing the skills of what people need tomorrow.
Fantastic, and that thanks very much. A really clear answer there. And Sue, that's a nice point to move to you and to bring you in. As Jonathan was saying, there's a number of questions kind of related to each other, I think, about making sure that the engagement is inclusive. A question from Anthony: working in an old-style local authority with a key focus on tenant and residents associations, how will they be sustained in their regulatory regime as potentially, as they themselves, I think, is saying there, are potentially underrepresented? And I throw that one in because last week the Levelling Up Housing and Community Select Committee's initial report from its inquiry into the regulation of social housing concluded one of the most effective ways of empowering tenants is through the establishment of tenant and residents associations led by tenants themselves. So that's the issue about how do we make sure that some of those structures are representative. But then actually in terms of engagement, question from Sophia: how can we better involve and engage with customers that have special needs, sensory or visual impairments, to be able to help in shaping services? And Tim, I think a question that Jonathan was referring to there, customers have a wide range of competencies and interacting with systems. So how do you kind of cater for that range? So I've thrown a few at you there, but definitely about representation at different levels. So Sue, over to you.
Yeah. I think you have thrown quite a few there. I think that what we've got to do is to understand that, again, we're creating a tapestry of how we listen and engage with our customers. And that tapestry and the colours that come in different parts of it need to be different to meet the needs of the customers that we're actually engaging with. So scrutiny, absolutely vital to organisations working to co-create and challenge the way that we're working with a group of individuals acting independently, reporting directly into our governance structures that say, we've looked at this from a customer point of view and the evidence is stating this, what are you going to do about it and how can we help you to do that? So there is an element of ensuring that you've got active engagement of customers who are willing to give their time voluntarily to help us to deliver better services. They're incredibly important, and we've had a scrutiny panel since 2015, and we work very hard to support them and keep them as being independent. You've also then got individual customers that perhaps have got a particular take on the way that we're designing services. So perhaps people with particular needs, perhaps a voice of older customers, and they can help us to look in particular at different ways that we can better serve, different ways we can change our services, different ways we can make sure that we offer services that meet everybody's needs. And then you've got information on the way that customers are interacting with you. So you've got that whole specialist, you've got very focused, and then you've got transactional information that's coming to you all the time. So how do we make sure that that is representative? Well, we make sure it's representative by designing different involvement arrangements around individual customer groups, but also by offering a range. So, we do Facebook Live, we then do conversations, so telephone conversations, we'll do activities, social activities on the ground. It's about making sure that that very rich tapestry is what can then be used to influence your service design, and that your board has oversight as to how that is actually working. So again, it's not there's no silver bullet. You have to be willing to do a lot of hard work, and you have to be willing to engage with people on their terms. Housing is not a non-contact sport. I recognise that absolutely. But the way that you address the issue of resources is to make sure that those people who can interact with you in a digital way do, because that's easier and it's cheaper, and that frees up more resources then to work with those customers who actually need you to be there in their communities, in their living rooms, listening to what they've got to say. It's just about balance.
Thank you very much, and I think that is a perfect note to bring things to a conclusion, and both some advice and a challenge, I think, at the same time. So yeah, plenty of hard work ahead. We know this is going to be from that survey question earlier, where there's going to be lots of change. And I think this has been a really helpful, certainly has been for me in terms of gathering my thoughts about where we might go next. Thank you all for sending in so many questions. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you to our panellists for an absolutely fascinating series of presentations and some really great answers to your questions there. Hopefully we got through a decent range of those questions. Thank you all very much for that. And thank you to SAP for sponsoring and making today possible as well. So yeah, thank you all very much for tuning in, and see you very soon. Thank you.